Hey, welcome. Chris here from Videomaker.com with your heads up and hands-on video for the Panasonic GH4 versus the G7. You might be asking yourself, how do these two cameras even compete with each other? How is it a fair fight? I mean, you have the GH4, which is at the moment a little bit under $1,500, and you have the G7 that at the moment is a little under $800. And really, Panasonic didn't intend the G7 to replace the GH4, so how is this possibly going to be a fair fight? So the answer is it's not a fair fight. I mean, it's like, the bully and the little kid. You know, the GH4 is a behemoth in comparison. You have a camera that truly can be a professional camera to a camera that's, I don't think, intended really to be in that same category. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna show you the footage that we shot with it out in the real world. You're gonna get to see that. You're gonna get to see it side by side with the GH4 with the same exact exposure, the same exact lens. In fact, I mean, I was swapping lenses back and forth, so you're actually seeing the same lens. And you're gonna get to see it and analyze it for yourself. We're gonna run a little montage with some music and you're gonna take a look at that. And then when I come back, I'm going to analyze it a little bit for you, tell you my thoughts on using the G7 as well as the GH4 in comparison. And well, you might be surprised at how much punch and how much value the G7 really has. Without further ado, here's that montage. All right, so what'd you think? Picture quality wise, did the G7 stand up to the GH4? Let me tell you our thoughts. The answer is yeah, it did. The G7, it's a little more contrasty. The dynamic range was a little bit better with the GH4, and the shadow and highlights looked a little nicer with the GH4. So overall picture quality winner, GH4. However, man, it did a great job, didn't it? It really beautiful quality picture, and you know, it kept up really well with the GH4. So what are the big differences between these two cameras when you're going through settings and stuff, since picture quality is really all your viewer sees, right? So all this other stuff is going to be for your benefit, for the shooting benefit, the life of your camera benefit, feel and use benefit, and then also the option and benefits you have in post. So you can shoot UHD 4K with the G7 versus Cinema 4K with the GH4. Maybe not a big difference depending on what your end delivery method is or a resolution that is. So if you're producing in 1080, not probably a big deal. If you're producing in UHD, well, you're gonna have a little bit more flexibility to crop and resize the GH4. So that is really dependent on what you're gonna be using it for. GH4 is a alloy body versus a plastic body, and they're about 150 grams difference, so the G7's a little lighter. And it's not weather sealed, whereas the GH4 is. So in California here, probably not a big deal, probably not gonna kill the life of the camera as much. Here in California, it's real dry, we never get rain. I don't even know what water is these days. So, you know, but if you're in the Pacific Northwest or really everywhere else in the country other than, you know, California, Nevada, Arizona, what, maybe New Mexico, right? It's probably gonna kill the life of your camera in the long run. Probably not going to last as long because it's not weather sealed. And the plastic, you know, the life of your camera, plastic doesn't live as long of a life. It's not as durable as your alloy body. And the dials on here that control your aperture and your shutter speed, they are easily moved. So you might bump them on accident and change your exposure. But if you're keeping good habits, you probably are checking your exposure all the time anyway. But they're probably not going to live as long as the buttons and knobs and such that are on the GH4. But still, you know, in the right place. They're right where you need them to be. And when I was shooting with these, I was shooting with the same lens, the 12 to 35 here, and it was hard to tell the difference between the two cameras when they were in the bag. When I was pulling it out, and if I just had the lens on the G7 versus GH4, I didn't necessarily know the difference between the two, except for this issue here, which is on the bottom of the camera, the battery door is there, but it's also where the SD card goes. And we have a plate here. It's not the standard size, so the standard or more standard universal plate is a little skinnier than this, so it actually does open. But with our plates we were using, I have to loosen up my plate, move it over, I can get the battery out and all that kind of thing. So if you're shooting a lot, you have a tripod that has maybe a proprietary plate, it's probably something to consider. Maybe go into your camera store and bring the plate with you and just see how it opens with the plate you have. But if you have the more universal standard plate, they are a little not as wide, so because of that it does open. So they may or may not be an issue for you. Here's another big issue though, is the headphone jack. There's none on the G7. There's no headphone jack. And I can tell you this much, if I trained someone or I showed someone how to use a camera and they weren't monitoring their audio as well as with their ears, with their eyes, I'd probably go, what are you doing? You really should be monitoring both. And I can tell you that you probably can have the expectation to have your audio messed up from time to time if you're not listening to it as well as looking at your meters. And yes, there are meters on the G7, but it's a big issue if you really want to keep professional quality video happening and being produced with your equipment. So that's why I don't think this would ever be used as an A camera by a pro. It's probably not dependable because of that. So that's kind of an issue. And there's another big issue that I think will keep it out of the hands of pros and people that use these cameras, especially for people to do interviews, is it's a 29-minute clip limit. Now that happens with a lot of DSLRs, mirrorless cameras, because of taxes in Europe, which is another story. But the thing about it is that it stops, and depending on what card you're using, you may have some time between picking up clips again. In fact, you will have time between clips. Depending on what SD card you use, it might be more. Whereas the GH4, although it does stop the clips at 30 minutes, it picks up again. So it doesn't actually stop the camera, it continues to roll. It just gives you 2 clips instead of 1 long clip, which is not a big issue at all. But the gap between the two, hopefully it's not something important that's happening, or you're running 2 cameras, which is why this is a great B camera. So, what else? Battery life. So, there's only a ½ hour difference between the GH4's battery and the G7, ½ hour to 45 minutes. The G7 will last about an hour 40, hour 50. We even had an hour 55 minutes. And the GH4 is about 2.5 hours. And it is, well, pretty amazing for a mirrorless camera. Because you look at the A7S, A7S2, A7R, A7R2, all those cameras that are mirrorless, it lasts an hour. So you're gonna go through 2 batteries in the same amount of time. So, man, the G7 beats those out as far as battery life goes. And we didn't experience any overheating issues or anything. So, but we're in California right now. It's pretty nice weather. I'm guessing if it was hotter outside or what have you, you might run into that, but we couldn't get it to happen. So not saying it won't happen, but it didn't happen to us. All right, so here's the biggest difference and an amazing thing that the G7 wins whole hands down, and I'm about to show it to you. It's the noise test. So take a look. Pretty amazing, huh? I mean, the GH4 did horrible with noise. I mean, as soon as we started cranking that ISO above 800, really, noise just started getting really bad. And I actually might even shoot the G7 all the way up to 6400. I mean, I'd try not to if I possibly could, but I mean, it was acceptable, which is quite amazing. As far as apples to apples comparison between the GH4 and the G7 does quite amazingly at holding its value and being a great secondary camera to the GH4. So that gets me to my recommendations. If you are a shooter, you're shooting the GH4 and you need a great B camera and you can't afford another GH4, G7, all the way, great fit. You're gonna love the results. It's gonna match up really well. You're gonna be really happy with it. But if you're shooting with it all the time, if you're always using a B camera, you're probably gonna ruin this guy after a while. You're gonna break it in to the point where it's probably not functioning. We didn't break it. That's just an assumption. But based on its value, its cost and the build materials, it's just bound not to last as long by comparison to the GH4. But if you are looking for a great B camera and you're not using it all the time, that's a great fit. I wouldn't hesitate to do it. In fact, I might even buy a G7 instead of another GH4, even if I had the budget and save the money for something else. But that's your own decision to make. But you can see the quality in the G4, I'm sorry, the G7, and it's pretty amazing. So, what are the other people that should be buying the G7? If you're a traveler and you like to do travel videos and you don't want to be bogged down to lots of different options, you don't have all those options in the G7, and it can be freeing not to have all those options. To have so many options means you have a lot of choices and decisions to make, whereas the G7 just doesn't have those. They're not going to be there to make you consider, so you can get to it and you can get right at it. It's lighter, so it's probably going to be easier to shoot all day with. If you're shooting photography, you're shooting any photos or anything like that, the 150 grams would probably make a big difference over a day carrying the camera, or if you're doing handheld all the time. And the thing is it has a great picture quality, and you're going to be happy with it. It's going to fit really well. I'd get rid of this kit lens and get the 12 to 35 that we shot all this stuff on. So those are the 2 people that I think definitely need to consider it. And here's the third, which I think is the most valuable, and that's you don't have a camera right now, you don't have a lot of money, and you want a camera with a lot of bang for its buck. The G7 is just a fantastic camera for that. It's It's going to fit your needs. It's going to get you into the hobby. You're going to be able to shoot in UHD 4K, which is just awesome, and you're going to be happy with it. It's going to give you all those manual controls. It's got its detachable lens. You know, it's just overall, it's a compact camera. You're going to have a lot of fun with it. It's going to be able to teach you a lot, and you're going to be able to get used to stuff in that way, and you're going to learn how, you know, a photo type exposure triangle works. That's about it. Pretty great value for your buck. GH4, a great camera. G7, a great camera. And well, now you know what's the differences between the two, and you can make the choice for yourself. I've been Chris from Videomaker, and I really appreciate you watching. Till next time, thanks a lot. As always, subscribe to our YouTube page, like, share, and comment below. We want to know what you think. If you love video production, want to learn more, and want to stay up to date on the newest and coolest gear, sign up for our exclusive newsletter and we'll deliver it right to your inbox. Want to go down the wormhole? We have more of our YouTube videos below. If you're a Plus member, check out the center video for a premium Videomaker.com video. I'm Chris from Videomaker.com. Thanks for watching.